people to know that
Stan Burditt is a man on a mission.
From Hamilton, we go to Burlington to Oakville.
And his wife, Aura, is making sure he stays on schedule.
So that's going to be quite a bit of a stretch there.
Today, Stan is taking a step in a direction very few men choose to tread.
we're doing a walk from London to Queen's Park over the next 10 days, doing about 20 kilometers a day. And we're heading there because we want to raise awareness about the problem of human trafficking in Ontario. And we want to have people along the way sign a petition that we're going to present to the provincial government, because we feel that Ontario needs to step up a little bit more as far as resources.
As founder of MAST, Men Against Sex Trafficking, Stan Burditt chose 2 years ago to fight an uphill battle, one against the growing issue of human trafficking in communities all over the world, but especially here at home.
I was going to a number of different events where there was awareness being raised, and frontline workers were talking about the problem of human trafficking as it relates to Canadians. And I started to notice that there was a real disproportionate number of women to men, like 7 to 8 women for every guy that would be at these events. And I realized that, especially in the sex trafficking area, it's the men that are creating the demand for it. So I figured that men should be at the forefront of fighting it. And so that's why MAST, Men Against Sexual Trafficking, started.
It's an issue Aura, his wife, says needs male champions.
Too many people think that human trafficking, certainly sexual trafficking, is a woman's issue because it's inflicted on women and youth. Primarily, about probably 80% of the victims are women and youth. But it's also very much a man's issue because they are the buyers, they're the ones that are creating the demand. And if men could have more respect and integrity, then human sexual trafficking would disappear.
And as Stan heard the heartbreaking stories from human trafficking victims, he realized the need was not only a global issue, but a domestic one as well.
I just stumbled across an article about human trafficking, and again, I thought it was in Cambodia and Thailand, places like that. And then the article went into the fact that it happens in North America and indeed in Canada. And then I did more research and found out that, yes, the problem is very real, and it's a very critical time right now, because the people who are doing the trafficking and exploiting are getting more and more of a foothold, and we need to fight back against that. And I think it's just the fact that people aren't aware as they should be about it.
Although there are no clear numbers of how many people in Canada are trafficked, according to the United Nations, 2.5 million people are trafficked into forced labor as well as sexual exploitation.
Then I started living out of a car.
Stacey was one of those victims, sexually exploited for 8 years. For her protection, we have concealed her identity and changed her name.
I was married. My husband died. Within the next 6 months, I was to lose my mom and my 2 best friends. And I also lost contact with my my brother and his nephews. So I was weak. I was vulnerable, and I think that I had clinical depression, although it wasn't diagnosed. And a friend of mine introduced me to her husband's friend, although I now know in hindsight that they were ulterior motives. And I was vulnerable, and he would go out every winter, in the winter, and brush the snow off my car, warm it up. I never got into a cold car. He was there for everything, and I fell for him. And very shortly into the relationships, it was suggested, due to financial issues, that I go and dance. And it was not something I wanted to do, but I still thought I was in love and that I was doing for my man and all of that sort of thing. And I ended up working in the bars for 8 years. His son came to live with us. He was very, very young. I took care of him. And at one point when I tried to leave, because eventually I realized what was going on, that he broke all my toes and took all the doors off the inside of the house and started bringing men home. At one point I didn't leave the house for 9 weeks. And I never had a key. All my identification, which had been held in safekeeping for me, was long gone, as were any of my friends.
Anywhere where you see the 3D work, the dirty, the dangerous, or difficult work, then there's a potential to find human trafficking in that area.
Marty Van Doren is the RCMP's Human Trafficking Awareness Coordinator and hears stories like Stacey's all too often.
And there's huge, huge money to be made in human trafficking. For example, the girls working the high tracks in Toronto, they're making their pimps on average $1,000 an evening. So there's big, big money to be made. So if you have 3 or 4 girls in your stable, there's a lot of money that's actually being made by those individuals. And they work these girls pretty much every day of the year, so there's not too many days off. There's a lot of money that's actually being made. In regards to forced labor, whenever you can get somebody to provide a service at a reduced fee, you have a chance of making more money. And sometimes those reduced fees are little or no money at all. Human trafficking is all about 3 words: control, exploitation, and profits. If you can control somebody, and I mean control their minds, then you can exploit their labor for profits. And as I said, there's a lot of money to be made there. And control is very easy to put in place once you can get the person isolated away from their support groups and their families.
Van Doren says the only way to stop this problem is by decreasing the demand.
If you use the services of prostitutes, you know, and if you go to the strip joints, you're probably supporting human trafficking in some way. If you buy, sell, or barter in counterfeit goods, you know, the knockoff purses, the knockoff clothing, most of these are made in sweatshops in third world conditions. You may be supporting human trafficking. The pornography industry is a huge, huge industry in the world. You know, and if you're buying pornography, you may be supporting human trafficking. So be aware of what you're doing. And if you're buying products, you know, make sure that they're made in non-forced labor type conditions. So you kind of address the demand side from that perspective. And knowing the indicators and responding to the indicators is absolutely essential.
That's why he says it is important for men like Stan and his group to get involved in spreading the word about human trafficking.
27 million
we are brothers keepers, and and men have as much of a responsibility to respond to victims of human trafficking as females do. So the more men that become aware, the better it is. And the biggest part of the program is that to see human trafficking victims, especially in the sex trade, as victims. They're not criminals, they're victims, and we got to treat them as victims.
People should be aware that nobody is exempt, nobody's safe, and it can happen to anybody. I've seen politicians, children, police officers, executives, and girls who are from group homes and things like that too, so it can happen at any level.
Stan and his wife Aura have made this a family mission.
So how are you feeling about it?
While he works with bringing awareness to men, she chairs the London Anti-Human Trafficking Committee.
It's actually become a ministry. It's become something that we're not just passionate about doing something as a human rights issue and as a justice issue, but it's also a spiritual issue for both of us. And it's just amazing to be able to have each other's support when we're dealing with things that are very dark, and to know that that prayer and a focus on God can make a difference and shed some light into some very dark places in the world.
And together, step by step, they both feel change will happen. In London, Ontario, Magdalene John, 100 Huntley Street.